You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Chris Marchese, mining analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Great to be back, Jim. Been, 2-3 days since we last talked?
That's right. You were our reporter at the Spokane Silver Summit. Well, now that the summit has closed for the year, what can you tell us about, your eventual conclusion from all of it?
Well, I mentioned there were a lot less vendors, which makes sense. And the ones that were there, they talked about how much their IR budget has been cut back. And that also makes sense because even the lowest cost producers are making just razor thin cash flow margins at these prices. But, the turnout for the audience, I would say, is comparable to last year, which one would expect to be lower given the price is lower and it's, been at these low levels for an even longer period of time. But everyone there was, just like last year, a true believer in why you own the metals in the first place. So, we had a great time, and hopefully it's, this continues next year. I think it will, but, it remains to be seen.
Some analysts are saying they don't expect the stock markets to be doing all that well in the far future, but some of them are saying for the next 6 months, the equity market's still going to be hot, and usually that means precious metals are not, but you have a different point of view. For example, you say the Swiss election could have an influence on the price of gold. Yeah,
so on November 30th, there will be a vote on whether the Swiss will back their currency 20% with gold. And the points so far shows that that's basically going to happen unless something big changes. I don't know how large of a sample size that poll was, but it makes sense, and that could cause others to buy because they know Swiss will have to buy so much gold over a certain period of time thereafter. So I would expect the gold prices to run up in the short term up to the election just in case it passes. Maybe the Chinese will buy more than they otherwise would. I know I'm going to buy more than I otherwise would. So, that should be interesting. And, it won't have an impact on it could, although I don't know if it'll have an impact on the short-term prices, but, you look medium-term, 1, 2, 3 years down the road, and, prices will likely be significantly higher.
Yes, we had one analyst predicting $2,500 gold in the not too distant future. But again, and he said, and it'll be a long, slow rise to that point, probably starting in about 6 months.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. And personally, I think when it breaks the breakdown point, which was previously at $1,600 gold. So when it breaks 1,600 convincingly, stays, above there around 1,650, 1,675 for a prolonged period of time, it'll be a quick ride up past to new nominal highs.
Chris, you were the first one to give a heads up on the buying of zinc because 3 major zinc mines will be closing and there are no new major replacements for them. How have zinc prices been doing lately?
Yeah, they've gone down from their highs this year at around $1.10. Now they're $1.02, $1.03. But they've been one of the best, if not the best performing commodity for 2014. And I don't expect that to change going over the next 2 years in terms of, price action relative to other base metals like copper and so on. Because, if the world economy slows down significantly, which I think it will, the demand for base metals won't be nearly as high. But given the supply issues coming up with zinc, the price decline will be negated to a, healthy degree.
And tin has also been doing well.
Yes. I wish I knew more about it and could make a more qualified opinion. about, my views on that, but, unfortunately I don't.
Well, I know with zinc, of course, it's in every battery. People talk about lithium and other exotic metals, but you have to have zinc in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's that, and as we've discussed, as you just mentioned, actually, the supply issues. You mentioned the 2 or 3 mega mines, but there's also a lot of medium-sized mines and smaller mines, and there's, very few primary zinc mines, coming online during that time to replace the lost production.
So again, over the long term, over the next 2 or 3 years, you'll probably see a much bigger move.
Yeah, again, that you have to compare this to other commodities because, it could actually go down but outperform, the other commodities by a significant, or other base metals, I should say, by a significant degree. Everyone thinks the U.S. is, doing all fine and well now. It's not. I mean, I talked to someone at the Silver Summit. I don't want to say his name, just because, I didn't get his permission. This was a one-on-one talk, and he consults with the Fed very often. And I asked him, what is the thinking there? And asked about, is there any chance of raising the Fed funds rate next year? Which, I think I've been saying on your show that I don't think there's any chance of that happening. He said, no, they're not even discussing that, or even if they plan to in 2016 yet. Instead, they're more worried about losing control of interest rates because they're starting to see some pressure. But, these are all manipulated, so, and, the Fed openly admits they manipulate it. They still reinvest maturing securities. So, that's something, I think if they did try to raise the Fed funds rate, it would be because the market is basically forcing them to. But at the same time, higher interest rates would cause the economy to go into a tailspin.
Also, too, going back to gold, any thoughts on India's new prime minister taking the duties off gold? Everybody expected him to do that right after the election. Is he going to do that at some point?
I think he will, and I think it'll be slow over a prolonged period. Again, they worried about the current account deficit, which is meaningless because it's money. Gold is money. And so, governments don't realize that. But I think that will happen in September. There were 50 tons of gold smuggled into India, and that's just what was caught. So you got to imagine it's multiples higher. So I'm sure the government realizes this and say, we might as well. Why we can't tax it?
You can't tax what you can't see.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's part of the reason why that will have to come off, and I think will come off.
Chris, thanks a lot for chatting with us. I'm glad the Silver Summit was a positive success.
My pleasure.
My guest has been Chris Marchese, mining analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find at silver-investor.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also up on YouTube. You can forward comments about the show to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.